Chair will call the Honorable Jen Coffey. Please identify yourself for the record, Ms. Coffey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Jen Coffey. I'm the National Director of Legislative Affairs for the Second Amendment Sisters, and I'm here to speak upon their behalf. The previous speakers, I agree with. There are a lot of red herrings being spoken. One of the things that is not being spoken about in the mass media hyperbole that has been brought about during this bill is that this law change did not change the law that said that you could meet non-deadly force with deadly force. Having stand your ground doesn't give somebody the right to pull up a gun and shoot them because they said, I don't like you. That's not the way the law works. What it does do is give you the right to be able to defend yourself. Safely retreat is nowhere defined. The problem that we had was people who did defend themselves in a court of law. The burden of proof is on them to prove that they could not safely retreat, not on the prosecution. I verified this with a number of defense attorneys before I spoke that language. And that is part of the reason why this bill was brought forward. In regards to this being the law for decades, well, for decades it was law that women didn't have the right to vote, but we certainly changed that. This bill changed a law that for decades did not give women equal treatment. If I'm faced with a 300-pound man in front of me, who's defining what I can safely get away from? If the people that come after the crime has been committed decide that, well, we think you might have been able to safely retreat and turn around and charge me, I now have to hire an attorney, incur the expense, incur the turmoil, become a victim of the courts a second time in trying to defend myself. In the last 2 years, there have been no issues. I've often heard it said in these halls, a bill should seek to solve a problem. What problem are we trying to solve when there hasn't been one? And of course, I will add, I don't live in Florida. This is a knee-jerk reaction to media. That's all this bill is. And you know what? Criminals don't care about the law. Matter of fact, I'm certain that there are a number of them out there that hope that you will vote yes for this, because it gives them greater protection under the law. Law-abiding citizens have the right to defend themselves. If I'm in the store with my child and he's on the other end of the store in the shopping in the toy area, and I'm on the other end, and a criminal comes in and starts shooting, without this bill, I have a duty to retreat. I don't get the right to go and find my child and defend him because I was closer to the door, so I have the ability to retreat. It's not clearly defined. What is clearly defined, and I really feel that this needs to be stressed, is that no one in the state of New Hampshire has the right to pull a firearm on someone and shoot them in the face of non-deadly force. Saying, I don't like you, getting mad at you and yelling at you is not an excuse under the law or understand your ground to shoot them. When somebody threatens you, threatens to take your life, kidnapping, violent crime, that's when this kicks in. That's when it says, I have the right to defend myself. In the last 30 minutes that you've been hearing testimony, there have been 15 women who have been raped in the United States of America. Every 2 minutes, a woman is raped. I have given you in my packet, and I'm not going to read the packet, New Hampshire statistics. In 2011, there were 429 forcible rapes that were actually reported. There are many that go unreported. Women feel safer when they have the ability to defend themselves. I personally have a member within my group who was brutally assaulted, and what gave her the ability to be able to go out safely in public without an escort was learning how to defend herself. She's hoping and praying that you don't pass this bill because she's afraid of what the repercussions may be. Our own law enforcement agencies have shown that the statistical rise in violent crime in our state has got nothing to do with stand your ground and everything to do with the increasing economic crisis that we are in. This bill simply creates equality under the law. It doesn't give protections to criminals. I would ask you to please read over the statistical data that I presented to you that are from our own law enforcement agencies and well-respected organizations. And in the interest of time, I will hold there and not go any further.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions? Senator Cataldo.
The Honorable Jen Coffey, how you doing? Welcome to the Judiciary Committee, by the way. I had mentioned earlier about being in the mall, and this was not a reenactment, but by the way, it was something that happened originally. And my question to you is, if you were in the mall at the time, being a woman, and this man began shooting all the people in the mall, would you defend yourself and the other people?
Understanding the ground, I have the ability to defend the other people. If I have the ability to stop that criminal, if I'm behind him and I see this person shooting people, I can stop him. If there's a door behind me and you pass this bill, by law, I can't, because I can safely retreat. One would think.
Are there any further questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony this morning.
The chair calls Michelle Levell. Good morning, Ms. Levell. Welcome.
Good morning. How are you today?
Good, thank you.
Good, fine. My name is Michelle Levell, and I'm representing the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance. I'm here to ask you to reject HB 135 and give it an expedient to legislate recommendation. I'm not going to repeat everything that I have written out, but I just want to mention a couple of highlights. I'd like to mention that in mid-March, there was a Manchester teen who was attacked by a random and violent adult. He was being beaten up, and a Good Samaritan happened to come by, told the adult to stop. Not only did the random adult not stop his attack, he turned on the Good Samaritan. Understand your ground, this Good Samaritan was allowed to protect himself and that teen, and the violent adult stopped, went away, and he was then being sought by police. But without that stand your ground law, that adult, the Good Samaritan, would have had no ability to really protect himself to protect that teenager. He would have had to just maybe use his cell phone instead. And who knows how much that child could have been beaten up further. So I do ask you to consider incidences like that do happen in this state when a Good Samaritan properly intervenes. The other thing I'd like to mention to you is the complete safety provision of HB 135 is not something that's clearly defined in law. I think most people would agree that an elderly person or someone with some physical impairment could protect themselves because their ability to retreat might be held to a different standard. Or how about a young mother with a toddler or a stroller? Those people, sure, they could stand and protect themselves and their loved ones. But doesn't that create an arbitrary and subjective assessment for who could stand and protect themselves and under what conditions? So, for example, my friend with 2 small children could protect herself, but if I'm out at night, I wouldn't be allowed to. I would have to first retreat. I think it adds more subjectivity to the law and certainly does not clarify it. So just in conclusion, thank you for your time, and please give HB 135 an ITL recommendation.
Thank you. Questions? Senator Cataldo.
Thank you for being here today, by the way. Do you agree that the law-abiding citizens has a right to protect themselves outside their home?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Susan.
So, Del, the situation you described in Manchester, it's your belief that if someone is being assaulted and you attempt to stop that assault, you would somehow be prosecuted, or there's some threat to you under this law?
The bill would have that person retreat and not get involved. The bill says that if you can safely retreat, in this case, the Good Samaritan could have.
But it doesn't, I'm sorry, follow-up question. But doesn't it also refer to another person? So you're saying that this law means that we would sit back and allow someone to be beaten and not stop that because there would be consequences to us? Is that your understanding of the law?
My understanding is that that person would have to think twice or maybe even 3 times before they get involved and try to stop that from happening. Because they would have to find themselves in a court where they defend themselves. As the AG's office said, it's an affirmative defense. That means you're already in court and you're having to defend your actions.
Okay, so
So
you believe that someone...
if somebody did intervene and chose to try to help, in this case, this teenager who was being assaulted, that the Good Samaritan could face being put into some sort of liability situation where he'd have to defend his actions and say, no, I chose not to retreat because, and maybe it would be plea bargain, maybe it would, he'd still be in a position to defend his actions first.
Okay. Thank you for your answer.
Senator Calvin with a follow-up.
If I may, for the record, I'm going to read part of this bill. A person is not justified in using deadly force on another to defend himself or herself or a third person from deadly force by the other if he or she knows that he or she and the third person can, with safety, retreat. Do you agree?
I believe that's what the law says, but I believe it leaves people with less certainty because complete safety is not a defined legal term.
Well, the question was that if you saw somebody accosted, then it's your right to have that person who's being accosted in yourself to get out of there.
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding the question, I'm sorry.
You see somebody being accosted, okay? And you're going to help. But the way this thing reads, you can't do that because you and the other person have to leave.
My understanding that is if I see somebody being hurt or beaten up, my first responsibility is to retreat if I can. And if I chose to get involved, I could face prosecution myself.
Thank you. The word was, you